When desperate physiotherapist Isabelle Carter agrees to marry wheelchair-bound billionaire Sebastian Vaughn, neither expects their fake marriage to ignite real passion, but their cold business arrangement becomes a deadly game when corporate enemies target everything they hold dear, calling all love story lovers. Today's episode will melt your heart and maybe even bring a tear to your eye. Ready? Let's begin. The storm outside Sebastian Vaughn's estate wasn't half as violent as the one raging inside his chest. Thunder rattled the towering windows of his study, each strike of lightning illuminating the remnants of a life that had crumbled faster than his legs could carry him to safety. He sat motionless in his wheelchair, fingers white-knuckled around a glass of whiskey he couldn't bring himself to drink. The accident had stolen more than his ability to walk. It had stripped away his empire, his reputation, his very identity. Sebastian Vaughn, once the most feared CEO in Manhattan, now existed as a shell of expensive suits and bitter silence in a mansion that felt more like a mausoleum. Heavy footsteps echoed through the marble halls. He knew that purposeful stride, the calculated confidence that belonged to only one man. Sebastian? Elliot Hastings appeared in the doorway, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You've been avoiding my calls." Sebastian's jaw tightened. His cousin had always been a parasite, feeding off scraps of success. But now, Elliot circled, like a vulture sensing death. "Get to the point, Hastings. The board is losing faith." Elliot moved closer, his eyes flickering to the wheelchair with barely concealed satisfaction. A crippled CEO doesn't exactly inspire confidence in Vaughn Industries' future. The words hit their mark, but Sebastian's expression remained carved from stone. He'd learned to swallow his rage, to let it burn cold and deep where no one could see it bleed. "They need stability," Elliot continued, circling Sebastian's desk like a predator. "A strong partnership. Marriage would give them the illusion that you're still in control." Sebastian's grip tightened on the armrest. "Marriage, Isabelle Carter, a physiotherapist. Young, competent, and most importantly," Elliot's smile widened. "Desperate. Her mother's drowning in medical debt. She doesn't have the luxury of saying no." The rain hammered against the windows as Sebastian stared at his untouched whiskey. He'd lost everything before: his mobility, his dignity, his faith in human decency. If marriage was the price to salvage what remained of his legacy, then so be it. But if Isabelle Carter thought she could soften him, she was about to learn that Sebastian Vaughn had no heart left to give. 3 miles across the city, Isabelle Carter sat beside her mother's hospital bed, her fingers cramped around a medical bill that might as well have been a death sentence. Sterile white walls pressed in on her, void of the warmth she desperately wanted to provide, but couldn't afford. "You look exhausted, sweetheart." Eleanor's voice was paper-thin, her hand trembling as it reached for Isabelle's. "I'm fine." The lie came easily now, practiced from months of pretending she wasn't drowning, just reviewing some paperwork. Her mother's sigh carried years of pain, both physical and emotional. The cancer treatments were working, barely, but each day of life came with a price tag that grew heavier. Isabelle had taken every extra client she could find, worked 18-hour days until her hands shook from exhaustion, and it still wasn't enough. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. The man in the doorway looked like money, dangerous money. His suit was tailored to perfection, his green eyes calculated and cold. "Elliot Hastings," he said, stepping inside without invitation. "We need to talk." Isabelle's stomach dropped. Men like him didn't visit people like her unless something was very wrong. "Whatever you're selling, I can't afford it." His laugh was smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "Not selling anything, miss." "Carter, I'm here to offer you a deal." He slid a folder onto the table beside her mother's bed. "Marry Sebastian Vaughn, and every medical bill your mother has gets paid in full." The air left Isabelle's lungs in a rush. "Excuse me, you heard me. My cousin needs a wife. You need money. It's a simple transaction." Her head spun. "Marriage. To a stranger, a man she'd never met. This is insane." "Maybe, but it's also your only way out." Elliot's voice was silk over steel. "You can keep working yourself to death, watching your mother suffer, or you can say yes and fix everything." Isabelle looked at her mother's sleeping form, at the machines keeping her alive. At the stack of bills that grew taller each day, her hand shook as she reached for the contract. Is it really a choice? Where do I sign? The Vaughn estate loomed before Isabelle like a monument to everything she'd never had and never wanted. The sprawling mansion with its marble columns and manicured gardens was breathtaking, but it felt more like a beautiful prison than a home. She gripped her single suitcase tighter as the driver retrieved it without a word. Everything she owned fit in that one bag. Everything she was about to become waited behind those imposing doors. "Welcome to your new home, Mrs. Vaughn." Elliot's voice dripped with amusement. The title felt foreign on her tongue, like wearing clothes that didn't fit. Let's get this over with. Inside, the grand foyer stretched impossibly high, its chandeliers casting ethereal light over polished floors that probably cost more than most people's homes. Every corner screamed wealth, but the coldness was bone deep. Sebastian sat near the fireplace, his wheelchair positioned with military precision. Even seated, he radiated power, control, danger. His dark eyes locked onto hers with laser intensity. Assessing, cataloging, dismissing. "You're late," he said flatly. Isabelle dropped her bag with deliberate casualness. Wasn't aware punctuality was required in a forced marriage. A muscle ticked in Sebastian's jaw. "This isn't forced. You had a choice, right? Starve or marry a stranger." Such generosity. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken resentment and barely contained hostility. Two people trapped in a cage of their own making, circling each other like wounded animals. Sebastian finally spoke, his voice devoid of warmth. "There are conditions." Isabelle crossed her arms, meeting his stare without flinching. She'd survived poverty, her mother's illness, and a lifetime of disappointment. She wouldn't be intimidated by a man in a wheelchair, no matter how much money he had or how dangerous he looked. "Then start talking," she said, "because I have conditions of my own." Sebastian's study felt like a battlefield at dawn. The storm outside had quieted to a steady drumbeat of rain against the windows, but the tension inside crackled with electricity more dangerous than any lightning. "My conditions are simple," Sebastian said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You'll live here. You'll attend social functions as my wife. You'll play the part convincingly enough to satisfy the board and investors." Isabelle's laugh was sharp, humorless, and in return, your mother's medical bills disappear. You get a generous monthly allowance. When this arrangement ends, you walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you want. When it ends, she stepped closer to his desk, her dark eyes flashing. "How long exactly am I expected to play house with you?" Sebastian's fingers drummed against his wheelchair's armrest, the only sign of his carefully controlled agitation. 2 years. Long enough to stabilize the company and prove I'm not going anywhere. 2 years. She let the words hang between them like a prison sentence. "And what makes you think I'll be a convincing enough actress to fool anyone who matters?" His eyes traveled over her slowly, clinically, and Isabelle fought the urge to squirm under his assessment. "You're beautiful enough, smart enough to learn what you need to know, and desperate enough to make it work." The casual cruelty of his words hit her like a physical blow, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "Really are charming, aren't you?" "Charm is a luxury I can't afford." Sebastian's voice carried an edge of something deeper, something that sounded almost like pain. "This isn't a romance, Isabelle. It's survival." She studied his face, searching for cracks in the armor he wore so perfectly. "Fine, but I have conditions too." His eyebrow arched slightly, such as, "I want my own room, my own space. I want to continue working as a physiotherapist." She paused, then delivered her final demand like a challenge. "And I want the truth about why you really need a wife." Sebastian went very still. The silence stretched so long that Isabelle wondered if she'd pushed too far, crossed some invisible line that would send her right back to her mother's bedside and those crushing bills. Finally, he spoke. "The truth is that Elliot is right. The board is losing confidence. My accident damaged more than my spine. It damaged their faith in my ability to lead." His words came out measured, careful. "Stable marriage suggests stability. It buys me time to prove them wrong. And if you can't prove them wrong," his smile was winter cold, "then I lose everything I've built, and you lose your mother." The weight of those words settled between them like a death sentence. Two people drowning in different oceans, clinging to each other, not out of love, but out of sheer necessity. "There's something else," Sebastian continued. "The accident wasn't random. Someone wanted me gone, wanted Vaughn Industries vulnerable." His eyes locked onto hers with predatory intensity. "Being my wife makes you a target? Are you prepared for that?" Isabelle's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to give you one last chance to run." She looked around the opulent study at the man who commanded empires from a wheelchair, at the contract that would change everything. Her mother's face flashed. In her mind, tubes and wires and the soft beep of machines keeping death at bay. "I'm not running." Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "But I want to know who tried to kill you." Sebastian's laugh was dark. "Dangerous. Get some sleep, wife. Tomorrow we start playing our parts." But as Isabelle was escorted to her rooms by a silent housekeeper, she couldn't shake the feeling that Sebastian was keeping something crucial from her. Something that would change everything. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, as if the storm had washed the world clean. Isabelle woke in a bed larger than her entire apartment had been, surrounded by luxury she'd only seen in movies. A moment she almost forgot where she was and why. Then reality crashed back down. She found Sebastian in a glass-walled room that served as both gym and rehabilitation center. He was pulling himself between parallel bars, his arms trembling with effort, sweat beading on his forehead. The sight of him struggling, vulnerable, almost human, caught her off guard. "Don't." His voice was sharp without him even looking at her. "Don't you dare pity me. I'm a physiotherapist," Isabelle said quietly. "I was observing your form, not pitying you." He turned to face her, still gripping the bars for support. Up close, she could see the fine lines of pain around his eyes. The careful way he held himself. "And your left shoulder is compensating for weakness in your right. You're going to develop chronic pain if you keep pushing like that." She stepped closer, her professional instincts overriding her personal discomfort. "May I?" Sebastian's jaw worked silently for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. Isabelle moved behind him, her hands gentle as she examined his shoulder and back muscles. The contact was clinical, professional, but she couldn't ignore the warmth of his skin or the way his breathing changed when she touched him. "Here," she said, adjusting his grip. "The strength needs to come from your core, not just your arms." For the next hour, she guided him through exercises, making small adjustments, offering encouragement when his frustration boiled over. It was the first time since the accident that Sebastian had felt hope that maybe he could get stronger. "Why are you helping me?" he asked as they finished.
"No."
Isabelle met his eyes steadily. "Because despite what you think, I'm not your enemy, Sebastian. We're both trapped in this. We can make each other miserable, or we can make it work." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. For a heartbeat, she glimpsed the man he might have been before pain and betrayal had carved him hollow. Then his phone rang. "Vaughn," he answered, his business voice sliding into place like armor. Isabelle watched his face change as he listened. The color drained from his skin, his knuckles going white where he gripped the phone. When his voice was deadly quiet. "Are you certain?" Another pause. "No, don't touch anything. I'm coming." He hung up and turned to Isabelle, his eyes holding a mixture of rage and something that looked like fear. "What is it?" she asked. "Someone broke into your mother's hospital room last night." The hospital corridor reeked of disinfectant and fear. Isabelle's heels clicked against the linoleum as she rushed toward her mother's room. Sebastian keeping pace beside her in his wheelchair, his jaw set in granite determination. Police officers clustered around the doorway like black uniformed vultures. Mrs. Vaughn. A detective with kind eyes and tired features approached them. "I'm Detective Morrison. Your mother is safe, but someone did access her room around 3 a.m. Isabelle's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Is anything taken?" That's what's strange. Nothing was missing. But they left something behind. He led them into the room where Eleanor lay sleeping, blissfully unaware of the night's intrusion. On her bedside table sat a single black orchid, its petals dark as midnight, beautiful and somehow malevolent. Sebastian went very still. Isabelle watched the blood drain from his face as recognition flashed in his eyes. "You know what this means?" she said quietly. His silence was answer enough. "Mr. Vaughn." Detective Morrison studied Sebastian with sharp attention. "Have you seen this type of calling card before?" "No," Sebastian lied smoothly. "But I'll increase security for both my wife and her mother immediately." After the police left, Isabelle cornered Sebastian in the hospital corridor. The afternoon light streaming through the windows made his skin look pale, almost translucent. "Stop lying to me." Her voice shook with barely controlled fury. "That flower means something. Someone is threatening my mother because of our marriage." "And do you know who?" Sebastian's hands gripped his wheelchair arms so tightly she thought he might break them. "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. Then explain them to me." She stepped closer, ignoring the way his eyes flashed dangerously. "I signed that contract in good faith. I married you thinking the biggest risk was social embarrassment and awkward dinner parties. But someone broke into my mother's room, Sebastian. Someone who knows exactly how to hurt me. And you think knowing the truth will make you safer?" His laugh was bitter, hollow. "The truth will make you a bigger target than you already are." Isabelle knelt beside his wheelchair, bringing herself to his eye level. The gesture was intimate, unexpected, and she saw him struggle against the instinct to pull away. "My mother is dying," she said softly. "The cancer might take her in 6 months or 6 years, but it will take her. I've already lost my father, my childhood, every dream I ever had. I have nothing left to lose except her. So whatever this is, whoever is threatening us, I need to know." Sebastian stared at her for a long moment. In the hospital's harsh fluorescent light, she looked impossibly young, impossibly brave. Something inside his chest, something he'd thought dead and buried, stirred painfully to life. "The Black Orchid," he said finally, "belongs to Marcus Aldridge." The name hit Isabelle like ice water. Even she, with her limited knowledge of corporate politics, recognized it. Aldridge Industries was Vaughn's biggest rival, a company built on blood money and backroom deals. "He's been trying to acquire Vaughn Industries for years," Sebastian continued. "The accident that put me in this chair wasn't an accident. It was a message, and our marriage is another message, one that says I'm not backing down." Sebastian's eyes hardened. "Aldridge doesn't just want my company, Isabelle. He wants to destroy everything I've built, everyone I care about." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Care about. Did he mean her? Why didn't Elliot tell me any of this? Sebastian went very still. "What did you say, Elliot?" "When he offered me the contract, he made it sound like a simple business arrangement."
Oh.
"Why wouldn't he mention that I might be putting my mother in danger?" Something cold and terrible moved across Sebastian's face, because Elliot has been feeding information to Aldridge for months. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Isabelle had to grip the wall to keep from falling as the pieces clicked into place. Elliot's sudden appearance in her life, the convenient timing of his offer, the way he'd known exactly which buttons to push. "He set me up," she whispered. "He made sure I'd be desperate enough to say yes. And he made sure Aldridge would know exactly how to hurt you." Sebastian's voice was deadly quiet. "I'm sorry, Isabelle. I should have seen it sooner." She wanted to rage, to scream, to hit something. Instead, she found herself studying Sebastian's face, reading the genuine regret there, the anger on her behalf that he was trying so hard to contain. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home and plan our next move. Because if Aldridge thinks terrorizing your mother will make me weak, he's about to learn how wrong he is." That evening, Sebastian called an emergency board meeting in his home office. The Vaughn Industries executives filed in like mourners at a funeral, their faces grave and worried. Isabelle watched from the doorway as Sebastian commanded the room. From his wheelchair, every inch the predator, despite his physical limitations. "Gentlemen," Sebastian began, his voice carrying absolute authority, "it has come to my attention that this company has a leak." Murmurs rippled through the room. Sebastian raised his hand for silence. "Someone has been feeding sensitive information to Marcus Aldridge. Someone in this room." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabelle found herself holding her breath as Sebastian's gaze moved over each face, reading guilt and innocence with the skill of a master manipulator. "I know who you are," Sebastian continued. "I know what you've done, and I know why." He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a manila envelope, placing it on the mahogany surface with deliberate care. Bank records, phone records, hotel, receipts. Everything Aldridge paid you to betray this company. Betray me. One of the executives, a man Isabelle recognized as the CFO, had gone pale as death. Sweat beaded on his forehead as Sebastian's eyes locked onto his. "Richard," Sebastian said softly, "did you really think I wouldn't find out?" The man's composure cracked like thin ice. "Sebastian, you have to understand. After your accident, you thought I was finished. You thought Aldridge had won." Sebastian's smile was arctic. "You were wrong." What happened next unfolded with brutal efficiency. Sebastian exposed the CFO's betrayal with cold precision, laying out evidence that would not only destroy the man's career, but likely land him in prison. The other executives watched in fascinated horror as their colleague was systematically demolished. But Isabelle barely heard the details. Her attention was fixed on Sebastian himself, on the ruthless calculation in his eyes, the way he wielded power like a surgical instrument. This was the man she'd married, not the vulnerable figure she'd helped in the gym that morning, but a corporate predator who could destroy lives with a few well-chosen words. And she wasn't sure which version scared her more. As the meeting broke up and the disgraced CFO was escorted out, Sebastian finally looked at her. Something in his expression softened slightly, as if he was seeing her seeing him. "Are you afraid of me now?" he asked quietly. Isabelle considered the question seriously. The smart answer was yes. The honest answer was more complicated. "I'm afraid of what you're capable of," she said finally. "But I'm more afraid of what happens if you lose." His laugh was surprised, almost pleased. "You continue to exceed my expectations, Mrs. Vaughn. Don't get comfortable. I'm not done surprising you yet." As she turned to leave, Isabelle caught sight of Elliot in the hallway, his face twisted with something that looked like rage. He'd been listening, she realized. He'd heard everything. The look in his eyes promised that their war was far from over. 3 weeks later, Isabelle stood before her bathroom mirror, adjusting the emerald necklace that felt like a beautiful noose around her throat. Tonight was the annual Vaughn Industries Gala, her first public appearance as Sebastian's wife, and the weight of playing her part pressed down on her like a stone. The woman staring back at her looked like someone else entirely. The designer gown hugged her curves perfectly. The jewels caught the light like captured stars, and her hair fell in elegant waves around her shoulders. She looked like she belonged. In Sebastian's world, the illusion was perfect and completely hollow. "You look beautiful." She turned to find Sebastian in the doorway, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo. Over the past weeks, she'd watched him transform from the broken man she'd first met into something sharper, more dangerous. The predator was fully awake now. "Thank you." She smoothed her skirts nervously. "Are you ready to convince 300? People that were madly in love?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Are you?" The question hung between them, loaded with meanings neither wanted to examine too closely. Over the past weeks, their relationship had shifted in ways that confused and frightened her. The morning therapy sessions had become a ritual they both looked forward to. Their dinners had evolved from stilted business meetings into something that almost resembled companionship. And sometimes, when she caught him watching her, she saw something in his eyes that made her heart race in ways that had nothing to do with fear. "I'm an excellent actress," she said instead. "Yes," Sebastian murmured. "You are." The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered like a jewel box, filled with Manhattan's elite dressed in their finest armor. Isabelle felt every eye turned toward them as they made their entrance, Sebastian commanding attention from his wheelchair while she played the perfect accessory beside him. "Remember," he murmured as they approached their first cluster of guests. "You adore me. I'm charming and attentive, despite my obvious limitations. We're the picture of marital bliss." "It's obvious limitations?" She looked down at him with genuine surprise. "Is that how you see yourself?" Before he could answer, they were surrounded by board members and their wives, all eager to meet the mysterious woman who had captured the uncatchable Sebastian Vaughn. Isabelle slipped into her role with practiced ease, accepting congratulations and deflecting probing questions with a smile that never wavered. But she was acutely aware of Sebastian beside her, of the way he watched the room like a general surveying a battlefield, of the careful way he navigated social landmines that could destroy careers with a single misstep. Mrs. Vaughn, a silky voice interrupted her thoughts. "How lovely to finally meet you." Isabelle turned to face Marcus Aldrich himself. He was younger than she'd expected, devastatingly attractive in the way of men who knew their own power. His smile was warm, his manner charming, but his eyes held the cold calculation of a shark. "Mr. Aldrich." She kept her voice steady, professional. "All good things, I hope." His laugh was rich, practiced.
8.
"Your husband and I have such an interesting history." Sebastian's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that looked possessive to observers, but felt like an anchor to her. Marcus Sebastian's voice was silk over steel, still trying to poach talent from more successful companies. Success is so subjective, don't you think? Aldrich's eyes flicked to Sebastian's wheelchair, with calculated cruelty. "Some might say true success requires the ability to adapt to changing circumstances." The insult hung in the air like poison. Isabelle felt Sebastian's hand tighten on hers, felt the rage he was struggling to contain. "You're absolutely right," she said suddenly, her voice carrying across the nearby conversations. "Sebastian has shown remarkable adaptability."
After.
It takes real strength to build an empire, lose everything, and then rebuild it better than before. She turned to Sebastian, letting genuine admiration color her voice. "Most men would have given up after what he's been through. But not. My husband, he's the strongest man I know." The words rang with such conviction that even she almost believed them. Sebastian stared at her, something raw and vulnerable flickering in his eyes before his mask slipped back into place. Aldrich's smile tightened. "How touching. I do hope you're prepared for the challenges ahead, Mrs. Vaughn. Marriage can be so unpredictable." "Oh, I'm very good with challenges," Isabelle replied sweetly. "I find them invigorating." As Aldrich melted back into the crowd, Sebastian pulled her aside, his face unreadable. "That was dangerous," he said quietly. "Aldrich doesn't forget perceived slights. Neither do I." She met his gaze steadily. "He threatened my mother, Sebastian. He threatened you. I don't care how dangerous he is." Something shifted in Sebastian's expression, a wall cracking that had been built over years of betrayal and disappointment. Isabelle Sebastian. Elliot appeared beside them, his smile bright and false as fool's gold. "There you are. There's someone I'd like you both to meet." But Isabelle barely heard him. Her attention was fixed on the woman approaching them, elegant and poised in a way that spoke of old money and older breeding. She was beautiful in the classic sense, with platinum blonde hair and blue eyes that seemed to see everything. "Sebastian," the woman said, her voice carrying a hint of European accent. "You look well?" Sebastian went absolutely still beside her. Isabelle felt it like a physical blow, the way every muscle in his body tensed, the way his breathing changed. "Victoria?" His voice was carefully neutral. "I wasn't aware you were in the country." Victoria's smile was small, sad, devastating. "I came as soon as I heard about your marriage. I had to see for myself." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. This was Victoria Ashford, the woman Sebastian had been engaged to before. The accident. The woman who had left him when he could no longer walk. "How lovely," Isabelle said, her society smile never wavering, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "You must be an old friend of my husband's. More than that, I'm afraid." Victoria's eyes flicked between them with calculated precision. "We were engaged. I suppose he didn't mention me." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Isabelle felt exposed, humiliated, playing a part in a drama she didn't understand. Around them, conversations continued, but she was aware of subtle glances, of the way other guests had noticed the tension. That was a long time ago, Sebastian said finally. Was it? Victoria moved closer, her hand brushing his shoulder in a gesture that spoke of old intimacy. It doesn't feel that long to me. Isabelle watched the exchange with growing horror. This woman had abandoned Sebastian when he needed her most, and now she was back, circling like a beautiful vulture. If you'll excuse me, Isabelle said, her voice steady, despite the chaos in her chest. I need some air. She walked away with her head high, ignoring the whispers that followed in her wake. But she didn't miss the way Sebastian's eyes tracked her movement, with a stricken expression that crossed his face when she looked back. On the hotel's terrace, Isabelle gripped the marble railing and tried to remember how to breathe. The night. Air was cool against her heated skin, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside her chest. Feeling overwhelmed, she turned to find Elliot beside her, 2 champagne flutes in his hands. I'm fine, she said automatically. Are you? He offered her a glass, his expression sympathetic. That was quite a scene in there. Victoria always did have impeccable timing. Isabelle accepted the champagne gratefully, needing something to do with her shaking hands. He knew she was coming. It wasn't a question. Elliot's smile confirmed her suspicions. I may have mentioned the gala to a mutual friend. He shrugged elegantly. Sebastian deserves to know what he gave up when he married you. And what exactly did he give up? True love? Elliot's voice was soft, poisonous. Victoria loved him. Before the accident, before the wheelchair, before he became the bitter shell of a man you married, she loved him when he was whole. The words hit their target with surgical precision. Isabelle drained her champagne glass, letting the bubbles burn her throat. She left him, she said flatly. She was young, scared. Mistakes were made. Elliot moved closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But she's back now. And Sebastian's marriage to you suddenly looks like exactly what it is. A business arrangement. Isabelle set down her empty glass with careful precision. The champagne had left a bitter taste in her mouth, but something else was wrong. The terrace seemed to be spinning slightly, and her thoughts felt sluggish, disconnected. What did you put in my drink? She asked, her words slurring slightly. Elliot's smile was the last thing she saw clearly before the world tilted sideways and darkness claimed her. Isabelle's consciousness returned in fragments. Cold concrete against her cheek, the taste of copper in her mouth. The distant sound of voices arguing in hushed, urgent tones. She kept her breathing steady, her body still, while her mind pieced. Together, the nightmare. She was in some kind of warehouse, her wrists bound behind her back, her designer gown torn and dirty. Through slitted eyes, she could make out 2 figures near a grimy window. Elliot and Marcus Aldridge. This wasn't part of the plan, Elliot was saying, his voice tight with anxiety. You said we'd pressure Sebastian, not kidnap his wife. Plans change. Aldridge's voice was calm, matter of fact. Sebastian is more attached to her than we anticipated. This will break him completely. And if it doesn't? Aldridge's laugh was soft, chilling. Then we eliminate the problem permanently. Terror clawed at Isabelle's throat, but she forced herself to remain motionless. She needed information, needed to understand how deep this betrayal ran. The marriage was supposed to be fake, Elliot continued. Convenient arrangement, but he's falling for her, Marcus. I can see it. Then we use that against him. Aldridge moved closer to where Isabelle lay. Love makes men stupid, Elliot. It always has. What about Victoria? She was supposed to be our ace in the hole. Victoria served her purpose. Seeing her again reminded Sebastian of everything he'd lost, everything he could never be again. Aldridge's footsteps moved closer. But his reaction to his wife's disappearance will tell us everything we need to know about how to destroy him. Isabelle's heart hammered against her ribs. Through her barely open eyes, she watched Aldridge crouch beside her, his face a mask of cold calculation. She's awake, he said softly. There was no point in pretending anymore. Isabelle opened her eyes, fully meeting his gaze with all the defiance she could muster. You're making a mistake. Am I? Aldridge smiled, but it was a predator's expression. I don't think so. See, Mrs. Vaughn, your husband is about to learn that even kings can be brought to their knees. Sebastian will destroy you for this. Sebastian can barely get out of his wheelchair without help. Aldridge's voice was casual, conversational. What exactly do you think he can do? Before Isabelle could answer, the warehouse door exploded inward with a crash that echoed like thunder. Sebastian burst through, but he wasn't alone. Behind him came a team of security personnel, moving with military precision. And Sebastian wasn't in his wheelchair? He stood on legs that trembled with effort, supported by forearm crutches, his face a mask of lethal fury. The months of physical therapy, the hours of pain and determination had led to this moment. "Let her go," Sebastian's voice cut through the warehouse like a blade. Now, Aldridge straightened slowly, pulling a gun from his jacket. How touching. The cripple learns to walk just in time to watch his wife die. You always were dramatic, Marcus. Sebastian took a careful step forward, his balance precarious, but his resolve absolute. But you made one critical error, which was, you assumed I was broken. Sebastian's smile was winter cold. You assumed wrong? What happened next unfolded with brutal efficiency. Sebastian's security team moved like shadows, disarming Elliot before he could react. But Aldridge kept his gun trained on Isabelle, his finger tight on the trigger. "Stay back," Aldridge warned. "One more step, and she dies." Sebastian met Isabelle's eyes across the warehouse. In that gaze, she saw everything he'd never said. The way she'd changed him, challenged him, made him. Want to be stronger? The love he'd been too afraid to name. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, and she knew he wasn't just apologizing for tonight. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't you dare sacrifice yourself for me." But Sebastian was already moving. He threw himself forward, his crutches clattering away as he tackled Aldridge. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then Sebastian was on his feet again, somehow standing over Aldridge's prone form. Blood seeped through his shirt, but his eyes were fierce, alive. "Are you hurt?" he asked, dropping to his knees beside Isabelle, his hands gentle as they checked her 4 injuries. "I'm fine." She struggled against her bonds, desperate to touch him, to prove to herself he was real. "But you're bleeding?" "Just a graze." His fingers worked at the ropes around her wrists. "I've had worse." When her hands were free, she reached up to cup his face, her thumb brushing over the sharp line of his cheekbone. "You came for me. Did you think I wouldn't?" "I thought," she swallowed hard, tasting fear and hope in equal measure. "I thought you might choose Victoria." Sebastian's laugh was soft, wondering. "Victoria was my past, Isabelle. You're my future. If you'll have me." Around them, the warehouse buzzed with activity as police and paramedics arrived. But in that moment, it was just the two of them, staring at each other like they were seeing clearly for the first time. "The marriage contract," Isabelle said suddenly. 2 years, you said. Forget the contract." Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion. "I want forever. I want real. I want you." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, pouring all her terror and relief and love into the contact. He kissed her back like she was oxygen, like she was life itself. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I should have told you sooner. You're telling me now." Her smile was radiant, transforming her entire face. That's what matters. 6 months later, Isabelle stood in the same hospital room where this had all began, but everything was different now. Her mother sat up in bed, color in her cheeks, the cancer in full remission. The bills were paid, the debt erased. But more than that, Eleanor was surrounded by love. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" her mother asked, watching Sebastian navigate the room with his walker, still healing, but growing stronger every day. Isabelle looked at her husband, at the man who had taught her that love could bloom in the darkest places, that broken things could be made beautiful again. "Yes," she said. "I'm happy." Sebastian caught her eye and smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. It was the smile of a man who had everything he'd never dared dream of wanting. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the city in pristine white. A fresh start, a clean slate, a future worth fighting for. Asterisk. Like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales. and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. I love connecting with our global community of romance lovers. The end.